Yeah. So next topic here, we're kind of moving down. We kind of covered that one part of that one. Okay, so the next big one we're talking about is U.S. to focus Pentagon task force. Let me stop here. U.S. to focus Pentagon task force on China. So you may have read these kind of global macros, and that these are trends that affect global markets. And you may have heard about obviously the history of communism and capitalism, America and China, the East and the West. You may have heard all these things. Um, but China's economy is expanding, right? China is becoming more influential. It's taking a bigger role in the world, which is obviously, as America's adversary, quote unquote adversary, the words of the government, that's not something that they want. They don't want the influence. They don't want to kind of be butt out. They don't want to be in a less effective position militarily, economically, financially, you name it. They don't want to fall behind in it. So this task force is, gearing up to take on challenges of managing their economic growth, of managing security concerns, trade concerns, trying to figure out making sure that you kind of they're stifling the growth. Not, and that's not the wrong word, stifling. They're trying to control it to make sure that they do not stop the U.S. from being competitive. They take a bigger role in these things and take the U.S. down a peg permanently, right? We want to stay competitive. So stay competitive, we have to compete. And this also includes, I think it was a 200 or $250 million or $1 billion. Some big amount of money was in a bill that went through Senate. So, for the most, at least a bipartisan agreement, and somewhat. And this was funding technology research in the U.S. to kind of help the U.S. bolster its research against China, who is having a lot of tech research in a lot of different spaces. So that's something to look forward. That's something to look at, not only in the markets, in general for everything, right? Because these are historic times. Some might argue that we're living in possible regime changes, but these regime changes do matter because the United States has for a long time enjoyed very comfortable positions, being the reserve currency, being the go-to, being the standard. And if those things shift, or China starts to take bigger roles in trade, bigger roles in security in the world, and where they literally are enforcing on their borders, these are challenges to the United States and could adversely affect the strength of the U.S. dollar. So, for instance, another point here is that Russia dropped $45 billion in the U.S. dollar reserves, which is a very small amount of money because there's like about $7 to $8 trillion kept in U.S. reserves across all countries, but it's a symbolic gesture that shows like we don't want to keep the US dollar here. And selling US dollars, right? If you think of an asset, you sell assets, their prices go down, they become less valuable. That's the same concept in the US dollar. The exchange rates begin to fluctuate, the dollar buys less, right? It's not as strong. Now, that's not such a big of a deal here, but there are also talks to drop U.S. denominated oil contracts, which could be a little bit of a bigger hit. Not too significant, but still, it's more symbolism. But it's momentum. And if other countries do the same thing, such as China, who holds some number of, I think, $3 trillion U.S. Reserves, if somehow they were to start unwinding that, that would be a very big deal for the markets in terms of the strength of the dollar, which then affects the strength of U.S. assets, the willingness for people to buy the dollar, buy U.S. assets, the safety and security and the reliance on U.S. debt could come into question because we've always enjoyed like AAA rated debt. I think maybe it got downgraded a few years ago in 2008. It's like AA,
Mm-hmm.
or it was AAA plus, and it became AAA. So still super secure. Those are just ratings of how likely they are to default, which AAA plus is basically non-existent. Those things come into question. If those were to come down, that would be detrimental to the market, and not just in terms of actual asset values, but in terms of what investors think, in terms of how they act, how they trade, what they buy. They may be shifting their investments to safe havens or out of certain industries into new industries. Maybe they even move their money into foreign stock markets to gain those types of alpha in those areas. So those are things to think about. Definitely, for sure, that would come into focus. So the China America issue, this is a lot more than just politics and old wartime regimes and ideologies butting heads. Like this could have material impacts on markets and economies over the next 5 to 10 years at least.
So, what's going to be another indicator that's going to show maybe something more aggressive that will affect the market? Like, is there something that's cascading or domino affecting from this? And obviously, any time that the U.S. dollar is involved, our economy, stocks. I mean,
Well, we right now are facing, I think it was like 4% inflation, which is people expected from all the stimulus and all the easy money policies, and we have interest rates low, right? The government's buying bonds, flushing money into the economy. Interest rates low, borrowing is easy, but that inflation gets pumped up, and as inflation gets higher, it makes the dollar weaker as well. So I would say like if you started seeing China start selling U.S. dollars, currencies, that would definitely be a big sign. But remember, China and the United States, they have a very vested interest in working together because they do $600 billion worth of trade annually.
Mm-hmm.
China's the third biggest U.S. trade partner. So it's not that simple. Like you're people have talked about like the nuclear war and it's escalating. Like yeah, that there might be some presence of that in terms of the fear, in terms of like the kind of posturing, but that's going to huge economic impact to both countries. So I expect there to be lots of sanctions, lots of political BS, lots of posturing moves. But I don't really expect it to be like any huge big wall because again, you start upsetting the United States, China, Russia, these huge economies, you start blowing holes in these, you're going to blow holes in all the economies, and all the global economy is going to feel that, and it's not really advantageous because if China right now is focusing on growth, the United States is focusing on tech development and growth. It's not really nobody wins if we just start trying to take each other's economies apart. So, but again, we'll be talking. We plan to be
Sounds
online
good.
Monday,
Yeah,
Friday,
that's a
so we're
future
gonna
topic.
yeah
Definitely.
cover all this stuff. If stuff develops, we're gonna talk